Today's episode, we're talking about womb trauma. Here with me today, special guest, aromatherapist, chemist, and herbalist Monique O'Neill of Softly Rugged, here to talk to us about womb trauma. I know it's definitely something that I haven't heard since before meeting Monique O'Neill. So we're going to get right into this topic because it's really, really heavy. First of all, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I really appreciate it.
Womb trauma.
Yes.
It sounds heavy.
It is.
What is it?
Womb trauma, we're going to go ahead and go. I like to discuss things from a scientific background and then break it down in layman's terms.
Okay.
So, with that being said, womb trauma is something that's in the mitochondrial DNA that's passed down from mother to daughter.
Okay.
And daughter to daughter, and mother to daughter, and so forth and so on, down the bloodline in the history of women. The reason, this is the only genetic code in the DNA that's actually able to perform what womb trauma is. So, when your mother is born, she's born with all the eggs that she's ever going to have in her body, including you.
Okay.
Once you're fertilized, you're having what? All of the eggs in your body that you're ever going to have. Whatever trauma that your mother experienced throughout her life, because you're already an egg pre-existing in her ovaries and in her womb, you're experiencing that. That's already imprinted into your DNA, right? So then when you're born, right, you're living this trauma, the past traumas that your mom had, then whatever trauma she's going through while she's carrying you, when you're in that incubation period, then when you grow up and develop and become a woman and have your own child, the trauma that you've experienced outside of your mother, outside of your grandmother, outside of your great-grandmother, all the way back to the beginning. So it's very important. This is the scientific background of how it imprints. It's very heavy and it's very deep. It's very important for women to know the power of their womb. A lot of women don't understand that the power of their womb gate is something that's sacred and spiritual, because you're bringing a spirit to life.
That was my next question. Like, how aware do you think society is about womb trauma?
They're not aware. This society is very sexualized in nature, whether it's you're reading a magazine, physical or digital.
Okay.
The entertainment industry, looking at the videos, how promiscuity is promoted on both male and females. I mean, the womb is no longer a sacred place, a sacred house for you and your king. A womb is an open door for the fly-by-night. I just feel like I want to do a little something risque, so I'm opening up my womb gate.
Makes sense. I was listening to an imam one day, and he just was speaking, and he was speaking to a Muslim sister, and she did mention something about women. We were entrusted with this womb for a reason. So it's just it just took me back to that mention, because I guess a lot of us don't realize that we are entering, some people enter us, they're entering our womb.
And we don't realize that every time that we're having unprotected sex, the man that we're sleeping with, because it's only with male, female to female, this won't transfer.
Gotcha.
Okay, but when a man is entering into your womb gate and there's no barrier of separation, his DNA code is imprinted on your womb. So it's inside of your vaginal walls on a cellular level. That's why it's important for women not to think that it's cute to go out there and have multiple partners at once and to live a very promiscuous lifestyle, because it takes a toll on our bodies because of the way that the Most High created us. So even though we think it's a cliche that women can't do what men can do, it's the truth. We can't. Wow. Genetically and on a scientific level. Wow. And that's just something that we're going to have to deal with. It's nothing that we For those who identify as a feminist, can change. You can't change it.
Are there signs, like what are some of the evidences that someone is suffering from womb trauma?
Loneliness. If
Wow.
you are always feeling lonely, abandoned, rejected, you have a lack of creativity, if you're insecure, if you're suffering from PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, if you're suffering from fibroids, if you've had miscarriages, if you have a strong odor and you are a clean woman, if you have heavy menstrual cycles, if you have irregular menstrual cycles, if your vaginal walls are dry and there's not enough lubrication. I mean, the list can go on and on and on. Sexually transmitted diseases can cause you to have womb trauma. You're not supposed to put soap inside of your vaginal canal. You're not supposed to douche the traditional way that most people think. They go get a Summer's Eve or Max and Gill and they go do that. No, you need a floral-based, herbal-based canal wash. All of those things can change the pH balance of the vagina. The vagina is very acidic.
So I've read some of your seminars and some of your workbooks, and you talk about, when you talk about traumas just in general, you explain how there is a spiritual side and there's also a scientific side.
Yes.
Is that part of what's happening here in womb trauma?
Absolutely. The spiritual and scientific meet and merge with each other during conception.
Okay.
Right, once that spark of life hit, because not only are you dealing with your mother's trauma, but you're dealing with the trauma of your great grandmother who had to endure harsh times in slavery.
Wow.
That trauma still follows the woman. So men, kings, you out there, when you're dealing with the woman who may have sporadic mood swings or go about her day not feeling celebrated, don't think that it's just something that happened to her in her physical lifetime. It's something that could have been generationally done from the captivity, right, of the transatlantic slave trade, or even further than that. If you believe in the sacred text of the Holy Bible, we can talk about how womb trauma, we can experience things that happen biblical times, because it's passed down from woman to woman, to female child, and it doesn't stop.
Okay, so because it started so ancient, is there a cure?
The cure is tightening up and addressing, no, seriously, tightening up. We have to take responsibility for our actions as women.
Right.
And a lot of times we don't want to deal with the truth because we lie to ourselves on a daily basis.
Right.
We can say, girl, I'm getting ready to go get on that treadmill, and then you don't do it. You're letting off endorphins and hormones in your brain every time you lie to yourself. So that's just not specifically for women, that's for men as well. But as a woman, we have to identify if we really do struggle with feeling anger and rage, if we had any type of sexual aggressive acts happen to us, that on a spiritual level, we're opening ourselves have gotten opened up because it was a violation, clearly, if it was a sexual aggressive act, to the spirit realm. But naturally, we have to identify our triggers. And there's ways that we can learn and teach and grow amongst the sisterhood with that. But first things first, you gotta be real with yourself. And a lot of people lie to themselves.
So when I think of womb, I think of giving birth, and we can give birth to obviously men and women. Can men have womb trauma?
Men cannot pass womb trauma on, but they can experience it very minusculely.
Okay.
Because again, the woman is passing the trauma on. So the man's experience with the womb trauma is just when he's in an incubation period. Our experience with womb trauma is generational.
Gotcha. So that's what kind of keeps this generational curse constantly rolling and just constantly going. Oh my God, it's very interesting. Are there ways that we can prevent this?
You may not be able to prevent what your mother and your grandmother and your great-grandmother has done with their trauma, but you can prevent it from moving so harshly to future generations by, one, addressing whatever issues that you have going on. Being honest with yourself. If you notice that there's an imbalance, if you're crying all the time and you're not understanding why and your life seems to be okay, on a natural level, then of course it's a chemical imbalance in the brain. On a spiritual level, there's a void that needs to be filled. And in order to address that void is spiritual and natural things that we can do to help heal the wound. And it's called the spirit work and the natural work. Mind, body, and soul, getting everything situated in a holistic wellness regimen.
That's the healing.
That's the healing. But it's something that's not instantaneous because this is 2020. Okay, and everybody think that you can put something in the microwave and pop out a gourmet meal. When you're talking about womb trauma, that's spiritual, that's science. It's not going to be easy for you just to get over it because you have to dig up the roots of whatever is causing that trauma. And ultimately, that's going to dig up some pain.
And it seems so what it sounds like is we all just have it.
If you are part of the African diaspora, absolutely you have it. Again, we don't even have to go back to ancient times. Like before, we can just start with the transatlantic slave trade because the United States of America don't allow us to explore our history past being a slave. Okay, so we're going to just talk about that. And we can start there.
Okay.
The trauma that our sisters and brothers and mothers and fathers and grandparents experienced, and I'm using those terms not loosely, because again, that trauma is transferred from mother to daughter, and so forth and so on. So even though it happened to your grandmother, it's like it happened to your mom or your great. You know, that rape, those beatings, all of that, and certain people in the community, and I'm one of them. I'm proud to say I have very strong opinions about my people, right? About what the so-called black person, who we are, and I don't deviate for that, nor do I apologize. And I don't have to apologize for the way that I look, the way that I sound, any vernacular that I want to use, and how I want to communicate, because we have our rights. We have a right, period. So how you can start on a path of healing this trauma is, one, identify. Just be honest with yourself. If you are a woman that's needy, if you are a woman that's like, nobody ever likes me, if you are a woman that suffers from anger and rage, I was one of them, okay, suffer from anger and rage. You have to address that and say, what is the root cause of this? And it's just introspection. And a lot of us don't like to internalize what we have going on because we want to push it off. We want to think about everything is roses and peaches, and the more you push away your issues, the energy around us, right? Because we're energetic beings, is going to magnify that. So what they say, what you focus on is what is brought back to you, right? Scientifically. Yeah. Spiritually, you can't run from a spirit that's trying to plague you. So generational curses are demonic. They're demonic beings, right? For those who don't use the term demonic, you can say jinns, right? These are negative entities that come and know you. They know your family bloodline. They follow it. It's called a familiar spirit, people. And there's a lot of folks out here dealing with familiar spirits within their bloodline and completely oblivious.
And as women, we can host that in our
wombs. And we can host it in our wombs and transfer it to our children. And our children may have never experienced a sexual aggressive act. And the reason I'm bringing that up, because I've experienced some sexual aggressive acts as a child. But the behaviors of a person who experienced that can transfer in the womb. So your child may never have had that experience, but they're isolated and living a hermetic lifestyle, or they're always seeking external validation.
The healing sounds like it's therapy.
It's very much so therapy.
Interesting. Coming up, we have community activist and media host Zarina Lomax to explain her story and how she healed from her own womb trauma. Coming up.
They say following your vision is risky, but I'm all in. I've already taken my education to a mastery level. I'm following my vision of beauty. Modeling for me exhibits beauty. When I was little, My mom put us in a lot of things, little modeling things, creative writing things. And so as an adult, to put that stuff into my vision, it's like already in me, and using it to help others. A lot of kids need models in this world to follow. Follow your vision. 54 Vision.
Welcome back. My guests today are talking about womb trauma and how to heal from it, and even if you can recognize it. Community activist Zarina Lomax is here to tell us her story and her own recognition with womb trauma and how she healed. Thank you so much for joining me. Talk to me about womb trauma. Did you recognize your own womb trauma?
I recognize it as I begin to help others heal. Yeah.
Awesome.
Because as you know, I do a talk show, and so the name of the show was called Talking About, which is now rebranded into the Zarina Lomax Show. And the show was focused on telling stories that people didn't want to tell.
Okay.
And, I got saved at 28. I'm 36 now. And I found myself kind of not sure if I was showing my faith, because I wasn't hearing what I was experiencing when I was going to church or when I was hearing stories. So when I prayed, God told me to start the show to bring those stories that people needed to hear. So there's nothing wrong with you being on the other side of it, but nobody was talking about the process.
So you are of Christian faith?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a minister.
Okay.
Minister. Ordained apostle.
Gotcha. I know that's right. So, did you recognize your trauma through,
I did.
Like, talking about theirs?
So what happened was, when I was doing the show, God dealt with me and said, you never told your own story, helping me to understand that I had not fully healed of my own, because if I did, I would have told my own story more.
Okay.
So I told everybody knew about me being raped as a kid, being molested by my uncle. I gave that part, but I didn't give all of it. So when I began to understand that I was still dealing with it, I understood that I had fully dealt with the trauma.
And what happened once you realized?
I told the story. So what happened was, so let me just kind of like give the story what happened. So I was raped as a kid for years by my uncle, from like the age of 5 to 8, told when I was around like about 9 years old. My parents did everything right. I didn't have one of those experiences where my family didn't believe me.
Yeah.
But I did lose, a relationship with my dad. My mother, she kind of had more children, so she kind of pushed herself into that, because of course she turned in because, something happened to her child. And then at 15, I found out an uncle had gave me HPV. And so that kind of took me back to the trauma. So it was like after I kind of got through, I would kind of get back. So then I was bulimic at 19. And then I went through a lot of rejection. When she talked about being promiscuous, I was very promiscuous, because when you are raped, you find love is doing an act. Because the person tells you to do an act to show that you love them. He prepared me for that portion. So if you love uncle, you'll do this. So in order to show that I love someone, I would do things that I would do. So at 28, when I got saved, I had an encounter with the Lord in my room. And he literally, like I told you, you can't explain, like I felt like everything lifted.
I was going to say, what was that like?
I kind of didn't get pushed into serving Christ. I went to church with my father's Muslim, so I had the option.
Okay.
So when I was there, my prayer to him was, I hear about you, but I don't know if you're real. That was my prayer, because I see other people's experience, but I didn't have my own.
Okay.
And I did. And so I literally told God, if you want me to serve you, you're going to have to help me to get through this. So he told me to write a letter to my uncle. I did. My uncle never responded. Last time I saw my uncle was like 15. He laughed in my face. He never has apologized. Mm-hmm. But I was 28, and I wrote the letter on Facebook. And what happened was, it wasn't about the apology. What God had showed me was that he had a life, because he had gotten past what had happened. But I was stuck there. So he was married. He had kids. I'm sitting on crying child. I'm like, you know what? You're right. So that was the beginning of my process. But I've been abstinent for 8 years, and people always ask me, because I needed 8 years, because I had that much trauma. Mm-hmm. I was raped, and then you relive being raped when somebody tells you have someone on account of being raped, and then you sleep with so many men, you can't even account for that. So that was consistent trauma. So I needed that time to be alone. But I had never told the HPV part. I'm healed of HPV, but that came through forgiveness. They when I went to the doctor, like, we never would have known anything. Like, you would never know. So, but they came through forgiveness.
So you said it came through forgiveness, because there's a lot of people who's not going to understand. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by
unforgiveness and bitterness makes you sick. So in my situation, when she talked about it earlier, I was holding on to things from my uncle, and so that that kept me in that place of having that connection with him. When I cut that tie in the spirit, and I understood where my true, life was in Christ, and I understand that I was already healed because he said it's finished, right? So it was already done. When I understood that and I internalized it, it was gone. Instantly. Like, I really went to the doctor and went a couple months later, and she was like, why are you here? And I've never had any issues my entire life. But as a kid, it was just like an ongoing story because of the fact that I was living in that place. But the moment that soul tie was cut and I connected to the real soul purpose, it was over.
I want Mo to interject for that for a second because Zarina touched on a very, very interesting piece. Some people will hear that and think it's hoo-ha. A lot of those cases or some of your clients that you speak to is a lot of it spiritual and mental to where they're holding on to something and they physically become sick.
Absolutely. The body keeps score. When you have energy, right, spiritual beings, spiritual experiences is energy. Energy never dies, right? The Creator gave us his breath of life. That's energy into us. So when you have that energy in your body, it can store in different places in your body. So hurt, pain, anything dealing with the heart is usually gut. When you're feeling, depressed or you have some type of addiction, like alcoholism, things of that nature, is held in your kidneys and your bladder, not because of the alcohol, but because of the energy that's associated with it, the stress that's associated with it, that spiritual influence that's associated with it. When you suffer from anxiety and things of that nature, you have unresolved issues with your parents, you have unresolved issues with yourself, and that can come in the form of panic attacks, neck pain, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. It can mess with your libido, it can mess with your estrogen, it can mess with your testosterone. So absolutely, when we're dealing with things, it's the spiritual and the spirit in terms affect the natural.
Sabrina, what was your healing like?
Well, can I just kind of chime on what she just said? When she said that, I actually had fibroids really bad until I was about 32. So the fact that they said I was possible to have hysterectomy, I looked like I had a set of twins when they had them. They weighed 9 pounds. But again, when she talked about holding, that's dealing with the womb. So my healing took place over a course of time. Like, I don't have a definitive blueprint that I can give someone. I can point you to the one that will get you there, which is Christ, but I can't tell you your process because your relationship is your own. And in my brokenness, I was able to establish a relationship with people that they can never take from me with God. So when they say you've been through all of these things, why the woe is me, like, that part is not my story because I'm thankful for it, because I can explain him in a way that you never can understand. So
I noticed that.
Yeah, like, because I love him. When you talk about somebody that you love and understand that at the age of 5 when you were asking God why, but then you go into a room and you see a 5-year-old twinkle her eyes because she went through that, and now you understand it at 36. But at 5, you're not going to get it. That little girl probably won't be made with that. So I don't really kind of get upset about it. I'm grateful for my story. I'm very grateful because in suffering, we understand his glory. So I think that my process, I really can't explain. Out of the heart flows the issues of life. Like, I don't have that portion anymore because that's not stored in my heart. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you I don't suffer with rejection, especially when you have someone laugh in your face, or your father kind of gets big. You kind of take on the shame and the guilt. But I also understand that's a part of my story. So,
did you ever think that it was generational for you?
I know. Well, yeah, absolutely. When you think about it, we're not even dealing with rape. When you talk about Abraham, you talk about Isaac. I'll just use them too. Abraham lied and said Sarah wasn't his wife. His son did. He did the same exact thing. Well, that's not my wife. So when you look at generational stuff, it carries down when we lie and we're scared of things. Fear, rejection, all of those things, that is definitely generational. So not even just with women, we all have different ways that we carry generational stuff. But yes, I have aunts and I have different people in my family that were raped, and they never dealt with theirs, and they're in the same line, they're in ministry. They may have been married numerous times. So this is again where they have not dealt with that because you've been married 5, 6, 7 times, twice. And there's nothing against them. I love them.
Right.
But they didn't deal with it at a younger age than I did. So yeah, absolutely.
And now you're being proactive.
Yeah, me and my cousin, all 3 of us, actually, I'm 36. So my cousin Derek, and my cousin Keisha were all in ministry. All 3 of us are back to back. All 3 of us were raped, and all 3 of us in ministry. So it's definitely, but again, the enemy loves to come with rejection, because if he can get you here, then he can definitely try to cause you to like walk away. So he can't stop what God has for you, but you can. Because you don't believe it,
right?
Because you're afraid,
The mind.
because you're rejected. So that's what I meant by my healing process was dealing with rejection. When I shared my story, that was the most watched video that I ever shared in dealing with other people's stories. But it was my story.
Yeah.
So I internalized that nobody wanted to hear that part, but that was the most thing that people connected to. So that was a lot.
At the end of the day, we all need to heal.
Yeah.
We need to heal.
You can find Monique's checklist and her workbook on www.softlybucky.com. And Zarina, where can we find your work?
Everywhere. I always tell you to just look up Zarina Lomax. I'm in the process of shifting out of Philadelphia, so if you go into Zarina Lomax on my Instagram page, you'll see everything.
We got a word today,
Girl.
a word.